Hello everyone and welcome to a new episode of the Stephen King podcast. This is episode 64 and we know that it's been a long time since we did number 63, but things have been coming in our way. But today Lou and I are here. Hello Lou, how are you?
Good, I'm very good. Welcome everyone from snowy Canada. It's hard to believe it just was our Thanksgiving, October 10th, but we already had snow, so it's kind of a bummer. I've seen snow at Halloween, but this is really early.
Yeah, then it's a good thing because today's topic is the Firestarter, so you might get warmed up there.
I hope so.
Yeah.
It's hot topic. There we go.
Yes. We will be talking about the book and the movie and actually the sequel to the movie, Firestarter 2 as well.
Mm-hmm.
But as usual, we're going to start off with the news.
Welcome. Do not fear the door that lies before you. We will protect you. We are your guides, Hans and Lou, and we will give you the latest in Stephen King news. But before we do so, you must prove yourself worthy. You must open the door and join us in the death room.
And first up is, we were talking about this, I think in the last podcast, or maybe it was off air, I can't remember, but we were wondering what was going to happen with the TV adaptation of Mr. Mercedes, with the tragic passing of Anton Yelchin, who had been cast to play Brady Hartsfield. He, of course, is no longer with us, so that left a void in the cast. And we're happy to announce that I think they've got a fantastic replacement. That is Harry Treadaway. And if you haven't heard of the name, if you're not familiar with him, I highly recommend you check out the series Penny Dreadful, where he played Dr. Victor Frankenstein. And he did a fantastic job in that series. And I think he will be able to bring a real twitchy, eerie quality to the Brady Hartsfield character as well. So I'm very excited about this news, and I think this is a pretty fantastic cast. And I'm curious what you think of this, Hans. Are you familiar with Penny Dreadful?
Yes, I've seen some of it. Not all, but I've seen some of it. And I think he's great in that character. I haven't seen that much of him, though. But what I've seen, I'm happy with. And I actually think that just the look of him, I think he actually is better than Anton would have been, just how he looks. So I think it's a great replacement, and I'm happy to hear that they did replace him and are moving forward with this one. It's supposed to be airing in 2018, which isn't that far away now. We're almost into 2017 now, so I think it sounds good.
Mm-hmm. It sounds, it actually seems like it's taking a while, 2018, because we've heard we'll talk about this in another story about how quickly the Dark Tower TV series is going to be released. But 2018, yeah. I guess they're going to take their time with it. But I'm really excited to see Treadaway play against Brendan Gleeson. So that should be really, really interesting.
Yeah. My guess is that they probably won't start filming in this year.
Yeah.
Since they haven't casted everyone yet, and I don't know if the script is ready as well, so that's probably one of the reasons that it's taking a while.
Yeah.
The next news is something that hit like a bomb, and that was that unfinished version of the Dark Tower trailer hit the internet. For those of you who were quick and watched it, would have made it to see it, because I guess it's Sony that pulled it off the internet as soon as they could. I doubt that they have gotten it totally off the internet, because you know what they say, if it's on the internet it will stay there forever. So it's probably out there, but they are doing what they can. I saw it, and you saw it, Lou?
Couldn't help myself.
No, I couldn't help myself either. I mean, who would have?
Yeah.
So, and this trailer, we're going to talk a little bit about it, and if you don't want to know anything about the Dark Tower, you will need to step away from your computer for a while now, because we are going to talk a little bit about the trailer at least, and it gave you a feeling of the what the movie would be like, and you got to see the gunslinger, you got to hear him talk, you got a chance to see Jake. We saw a little bit of the Man in Black, we didn't see that much of him. We saw a little bit about these, I don't know what their names are, but those creature that doesn't have human faces but hiding behind them.
Taheen.
Yeah, exactly. And we saw how they moved their masks with their faces and stuff. We saw a little bit of shooting, we saw a little bit of action. So it gave a pretty good feeling of what to expect in the movie. Didn't you think so?
Yes, but before I give my reaction to it, I just want to point out to everybody that the quality of this trailer was pretty bad. It was very blocky. It's not in HD by any stretch of the imagination. It's more like a very bad VHS tape kind of quality. So it's really hard to make out some of the details in some of the scenes, and a lot of the special effects shots were not done yet. So you could see like green screen sticking out in various parts of the scenery as well. So.
My guess is that someone filmed it phone or something like that.
Yeah.
From TV.
Yeah. So. Apparently somewhere, the source of this was somewhere in Taiwan. I don't know if Sony has a lab there or something, or hires a company there to work on these trailers, but it was very much a work in progress thing. So things could change. And I believe Sony has even come on record as saying that this is not the final version of the trailer, and there will probably be different content in the trailer. But I think overall most of it will still show up, because it does a pretty good job of setting up the premise of the movie. Surprisingly, there's a lot of Jake in this. I think he inhabits the first half of the trailer just by himself. So it's kind of interesting, and I think it just reemphasizes the approach that they're taking, that they're going to start this story in our world, get the people invested in the characters, and then move into the more fantastical elements, which I think is a good approach. So I was very impressed with the scenes with Matthew McConaughey as the Man in Black. He looked very evil. The Roland scenes were hard to tell, because he was mostly in, a lot of his scenes were dark, and because of the quality of the video, it was very hard to tell exactly what he's doing, though they showed some of his gunslinger skills, and they did have him quoting the gunslinger mantra at the end of the trailer, which was good. And I actually did like they were playing the song from The Who for Jake, which I actually thought worked fairly well. The only sequence I didn't like was there's a scene with Jake talking to a psychiatrist about his dreams. And I understand that they want to be able to get this information across as quickly as possible to non-Dark Tower fans, but it just comes off really clunky to me. I would like to see a more subtle and organic approach to it, but it looks like the psychiatrist scene where Jake is telling him about his dreams, and that they're actually not dreams and that they're real and there's other worlds and so forth, and basically setting up the whole arc of the Dark Tower in these scenes is just not the way I would do it. But having said that, I didn't think the scene itself was done badly, and I thought the psychiatrist was playing the part fairly well in that, but it's not the way I would like to see that information relayed to the audience. But it's when you have a lot of money on the line like this, you want to get the ideas out as quickly as possible to the audience, and you're sending out that message to a wide spectrum of viewers. So they want to make that as clear as possible as exactly as what's going on. It's kind of like Lord of the Rings movies. They did it with a prologue, setting up the whole Middle Earth conflict. Here, it looks like they're going to do that same kind of thing with this psychiatrist scene. So we'll have to see. And I know we were talking before we did the podcast, Hans, and because you've been listening to books, you had an interesting reaction to the actor Tom Taylor playing Jake.
Yeah, that was actually one of the biggest problem I had with this trailer. I've been listening. I started book 5 here about a week ago, and I actually was quite disappointed, because I didn't think he looked at all as I imagined him when I listened to the books. Not that he was bad in any way, acting or anything like that, but the visual look of him looked totally opposite or totally wrong from what I envisioned when I listened to the books. So that was a bit disappointing to me, I think. And also I like the music, as you say. I really hope they keep the music. I think that was like 80% of the mood of the movie. I really liked that part. And, well, as you say, the shrink part, I have a very bad feeling about that, because it's almost like when you watch this trailer and we see how Jake enters into Roland's world through the house, and it's obviously the first time, if they haven't cut the trailer in a way that tricks us. But it seems like that's the first time he meets Roland, and he says, "Oh, it's you," compared to his drawings, and that would mean that they would basically have cut out much of the first book with Jake and Roland and everything that happens under the mountains and things like that. And I can understand that they do that because they want to hurry up. Or I was hoping for a while that, okay, they are hurrying it up. They are showing this. They are making, when Jake moves across to Roland's world for the second time, if you go by the book, that's through the house, which, by the way, in the trailer seems to be a quite disappointing way based on the books. And I was thinking that maybe, okay, they are showing us that in the first movie. And then it turns out to be that, oh, that was actually the second time Jake traveled to Roland's world, and in an upcoming movie we are going to get like flashbacks to what happened under the mountain and everything like that. But if they now are doing this as this is the first time Jake meets Roland, they are pulling that option away, because then they can't very well think back and they have met before. And I think that even though, as I'm sure a lot of people are screaming out loud now that I say it, this is not a adaptation of the books, this is a continuation. I think that is one very powerful scene when they are under the mountain and Roland sacrifices Jake and everything like that. And I think that should have been in the movie in some way. I'm not saying that they need to adapt the entire first book, but I think they should have had that, because that shows Roland's determination to reach the tower. He's willing to sacrifice anyone. I feel somewhat, I like the mood of the trailer, but I feel somewhat that my worst expectation has somewhat been confirmed that they will be in the movie. So I'm very conflicted here. Some of the things made me happy with it, and some of the things made me go like, okay, I know that was coming. So I don't know. I'm conflicted, and I can't really decide if this trailer made me more calm or not with what's the end result is going to be.
Yeah. You just jogged my memory on something that I wanted to mention as well, because I agree with you on the whole traveling under the mountain. That would be a sequence I would like to see. I think you're right. I don't think that's going to be shown to us, maybe in a flashback, but with all the material they have to cover, I don't know. I just have a feeling that the first book is the hardest book to do an adaptation of, and I think it turns off a lot of people because it's more like a legend as opposed to a story, if you know what I mean. Like it's more kind of like the Silmarillion is compared to like Lord of the Rings. It's dry in a way, and I think that they might just drop that part of it because it's just too difficult to film. What I do like, and again, this is hard to say for sure, is that much like they seem to be setting up the Dixie Pig now so that when it reappears, if they get that far and get to show when Father Callahan and Jake go back there, people are going to recognize that place and say, whoa, that's a bad place. And the same thing was with this house, the Dutch Hill Mansion that Jake is it looks like in the movie is going to be his first transference over to Midworld. I hope that, and we don't know if Jake is going to die in this first movie. I hope that they are setting this up so that if we do come back to it again in another movie, like in the Drawing of the Three, that's when the house is going to try to actively stop Jake, and people will see this place and it's creepy, but it's a nice setup for when if they ever do use it again. And the house is actively trying to stop Jake with the walls tearing apart and trying to grab him and all that kind of stuff. So we'll have to see. But overall, if you keep in mind that this is more like a sequel than a true adaptation, there's enough in there that works for me. I really think that the actors that we're seeing here, McConaughey, Elba, and Tom Taylor, I think they're all working for me as the characters, which is the most important thing. So I'm more optimistic than worried at this point still. So, and I think Idris Elba really does look pretty badass as Roland. Like he's, it's hard to tell because it's not clear all the time, but when he's in action, he looks pretty badass. And, there was a pretty good shot of him pulling back his duster, and you could see the gun belt with all the bullet clips. And then he pulled his guns out and he was shooting at something above them. I think it was really hard to tell exactly what was going on there, but he looked pretty badass. So we'll have to see.
Yeah. One thing that I think is very important with this adaptation or this movie is even though it's not an adaptation, and I'm totally fine with that, and I'm totally fine with that they won't adapt the books, but there are certain key elements that I think they need to get in. They need to establish a relationship between the character, and the most important thing is that characters doesn't change too much. I mean, books Roland is in one way, and I don't think he should be a totally different person, and that goes for them all. So I think it's very important that they keep the personality of the character, if that makes any sense. And one thing that worried me is, and I know I mentioned this to you earlier, but that it seems to be, we get some scene where Roland is throwing himself off a rooftop and shooting and everything. And one worry that I have is that book, even though Roland there's a lot of action and he's physical and he's good with his gun, they can't turn him into like a Jason Bourne or a James Bond. They need to keep him in the right mood. So I hope they don't do this too much an action movie, or at least not with the wrong type of action. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
I got the feeling from when he throws himself off a rooftop and shooting, and I know that was just a segment of a full scene, so it's hard to actually say what it's about. But that was one of the alarm bells that came off for me, that I hope they're not turning him into something that he really isn't in the books.
Yeah, I don't want us to make too much of a judgment, because those were the parts of the trailer that for me were really hard to see, because his movement was so much in dark settings. But how to display his powers without using his quickness on the draw and things like that, without some sort of visual trickery, like making him look like Neo in the Matrix or something like that. Like, I think that's what they're looking at doing. And I can understand that, because I guess you could speed the film up a little bit when it's just him on the screen by himself, but he has to be interacting with the environment when he's doing all this stuff at the same time. And the only way I can really see to do that is to slow down this action so that we can see that he is so much faster than everybody else. But it'll be interesting. I can't make a judgment one way or the other on that right now, because those scenes were just not clear enough. So
no, and we don't really know the context of them either. So it's just a feeling you get when you look at it, and that's all we go from. Because it's just like with the Carrie remake, I just didn't like the way that the action sequences were handled in that movie at all either. So like the way Brian De Palma did it with Sissy Spacek, how her eyes would just get really wide and white, and she would just turn her head and you'd hear that little bit of like the psycho violin riff. I thought that worked great, but in the remake, she was like moving her arms around and she looked like something out of Star Wars with like trying to use the Force or something like that. And that just totally turned me off. So how they handle Roland's, I don't know what the best way to show that he's just a cut above everybody else without using some sort of slow down or speed up in the film. We'll have to see how they do it. But I don't want him like leaping over buildings and stuff like that. Like don't give him like superhuman strength or nothing. Like he's just a regular dude in that respect, but he's just fast, right? And tough. So that's what we need to see. And if they just do subtle things to show his prowess with his guns and that's all I'm looking for. I don't want to have some fancy over the top visual trickery to make him look like Doctor Strange or something like that. Save that for Flag. Yep.
Yeah. All right. So we'll, it's February's coming up, so we'll have to see. And the trailer is supposed to be out, they're saying by Christmas time, I believe, before Christmas. So I've heard reports at the end of October, but maybe that was in reference to the EW Pop Festival where they're going to show some exclusive footage of the movie. So, of course, we will be reporting on that when that comes out. That should be exciting. Anyhow, that's enough Doc Tower, and I will put some time marks in here in the liner notes so people who want to jump over this part of the news can do so without hearing anything. But our next item is still Dark Tower related, but it's not spoilery. It's just an announcement that the plan that Ron Howard had way back when he was going to helm this was to do a series of movies and TV series. And it looks like that the second part of that plan is going to come to life with a Dark Tower series heading to TV. And this again is reported to us from EW. And in that article, they say Sony and MRC, who are doing a joint production of the Dark Tower franchise, have committed not to just financing a pilot, but a full run of between 10 to 13 episodes of the Dark Tower TV show, which will begin shooting in 2017 with plans to premiere it in 2018. Ideally, this is about a year after the first movie has been in the theaters and should be coming available for streaming or on cable. And this, again, some of the stuff is kind of sends up like my spidey senses. We have to come up with a Dark Tower term. My Dark Tower shine, I guess, or something is tingling a little bit here because they've mentioned that they're going to have Roland and Tom Taylor probably in cameos, reprising their roles and being used for the framing device for the show's central story, which takes place, as everybody knows, it covers the events of Wizard and Glass and takes place when Roland is very young and just at the beginning of his journey as a gunslinger. And they do mention that they will cast a young actor to play this Roland, which that will be tough to get an actor that can carry the same gravitas and imposement that Idris Elba will bring to the character. They're also mentioning that Matthew McConaughey might show in it, but I'd be very surprised if they did that. And actually, that's not a big issue because Flag can change his shape, so they could get another actor to easily step in for whatever involvement they want to have for Flag in the TV series. But for me, the two things that stand out for me, they want to premiere this in 2018, which to me doesn't fit. It's not the right time. If the first movie has just been out and the second one, like to me, this TV series should play out after the second movie, unless they're going to do the backstory of Roland actually from what is in Gunslinger with him in court and his original contact with Cuthbert and so forth. But that's not what I'm seeing from all the reports that we've been getting. So I'm hoping that's what they're going to do. I would much rather see the Roland's passing of his trial section of the story, and that would make sense with just Elba and Jake or Tom Taylor, because that other story really, to me, should have the whole Roland's whole quartet listening to it, not just Jake. But we'll have to see. What do you think, Hans?
Yeah, it leaves a lot of questions, definitely. But I was thinking that the fact that Elba and Tom Taylor is going to be in this one, I think it's pretty clear that they have to be in the wraparound story, and Elba has to tell this to a young Jake. But I was thinking that if they do this one, and this TV show airs approximately around the same time that the second movie is out, if they have casted Eddie and Susanna, they could actually be in the wraparound story for the TV show as well. And it will maybe in a nice way win together the second movie and the TV show by having those characters in both versions there. So I think that could be working, or they are just letting Roland tell this to Jake, which I think we could live with that, but I think it would be better if he told it for everyone. But if they don't make any other big connection to Roland's past other than just doing this TV show, we could live without it. So I think it would work out either way. But I think it would be a fun way to introduce Eddie and Susanna, just a little tease in this first episode of the TV show, and then before it ends, and we may see them a little bit in the ending as well, the movie premieres and there they are. I think that could be pretty effective.
We'll have to see the timing, yeah.
Yeah. And as for the Man in Black, I think it would be interesting if McConaughey played him in the TV show as well, because that would show that he is ageless and he is something other than a normal man, that he is the same when Roland is young as when you meet him when he's older. So I actually think that would be good if he played that part in the TV show instead of having someone else do it for the whole. That would really drive the point that he is inhuman.
Yeah.
But it will be interesting to see, and I think maybe one of the reasons that it's being pushed so far ahead is that even though they announce it now, they still will have the chance to pull the plug on it if the movie fails. If they were going to have it like or in the next year, say, then they would have to start shooting about now. Then if the movie fails, they will end up with a TV show that no one really wants to see, maybe. So I think there's a lot of things like that they are considering.
Yeah, you could read that as a positive sign that they must have seen a rough cut of the movie and feel confident enough that it's going to be successful enough for them to start on this TV series even before the movie's been released in the theaters. So that's that's speculation, but that's a nice positive speculation that I'm hoping is the reason why they've decided to jump on this TV series without even having the first movie in the theaters yet.
Yeah, and the next news is also actually something leaked. This time it's from the new It movie, or the upcoming It movie. And this is interesting because there has been tons and tons of photos from the It movie and from the set, and people have filmed the losers clubs, riding bikes and doing other kind of stuff. So they have been very generous with letting people close with cameras. So we have been able to follow the shooting of the movie pretty well. And they published 2 official photos of Pennywise. But late September, a photo of Pennywise in the scene was actually leaked. He was in the sewer, and you could see the face of Pennywise and parts of the upper body in black and white. This photo came online. Everybody reported on it, and just same day or the day after, everyone had pulled the image away, and probably that was the studio that didn't want to reveal too much about Pennywise. And that tells, at least me, I think, that they want to keep Pennywise a surprise and want to have him appear and be spectacular when he appears, when the finished film is done, or maybe in a trailer. So that's interesting, I think, that they are keeping him on the wraps when they've been so open about everything else. And, I think that might be a wise move, actually.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I'm looking at your site here. You had an article about it. There was a video too, apparently. I don't know what it was on the video, because when I clicked on it, it says it's been removed by the user. So
yeah, it was really just the still photo of Pennywise, and
okay.
They were zooming in on it, so it got closer, because a photo was actually from behind, from someone who operated a camera, and in the camera you could see the photo that the camera was shooting of Pennywise.
Okay.
So that it started quite a bit away, and then it zoomed in, and ended up showing just a photo of Pennywise. So
okay.
It's not a moving, or was not a moving clip, was just a still photo that they zoomed in on. So that's, I guess, everything, as we said, is still on the net. But I think that one is a little bit harder to find.
Okay. I didn't see it. I don't. But I do think somebody colorized one of the picture that they released of Pennywise, the full body shot one, and that looked pretty good too. So
yeah, I think they brightened it up because it was kind of dark, and then colorized it. So
yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all the movie news and TV news. Now we're going to go back to the books, and our first book related report of news is that Stephen King's nonfiction book, Hearts in Suspension, will launch in Maine on November 7th. And that will be at the Collins Center. It's at the University of Maine. And he will be present to do a reading from the book and discuss his student days at the University of Maine, which was a turbulent area. Of course, that was during the Vietnam War. And apparently some of his fellow classmates and friends who were at the school at the same time are also going to be present. And some of them also co-authored the collection. Starts at 7 p.m. and tickets went on sale October 7th. So I don't know if there's any tickets left. You guys can tell us if anybody's going, and this will be very interesting. It's a non-fiction collection, and I would love to get this book. It's 373 pages. He was there 50 years ago, which is hard to believe. So the book is also for sale, and there's a link where you can pre-order the book from the University of Maine website. I guess the problem is, again, for us non-U.S. residents, shipping is going to be prohibitive.
Yeah. I know that the book is $30.
Yep.
And the postage to get it to Sweden is $35. So it's going to be double the price to get it here.
Yeah, I'm just trying to go. They have a separate link for Canada, which is interesting.
Yeah,
I wasn't aware of it.
For different part of the world.
World international. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's interesting. It will also actually, from the beginning, I didn't think that this was going to be a Stephen King book. I thought it was going to be a University of Maine book with King participating in it. But it's clear, more and more clear that this is actually a Stephen King book. So we are getting 2 Stephen King books this year, so that's worth mentioning. But also it will have one of the stories from Hearts in Atlantis, the one where they play cards, will be included. And King is having a new essay called 5 to 1, 1 to 5. And we are getting 4 installment of the King Garbage Truck, which is the column he wrote when he went to University of Maine. So there's quite a lot of interesting stuff in here to check out. And one guess is that this book will be quite limited in its numbers, I think, because it's the university that's printing it and not the publisher. So the chances are that this might end up like with Simon & Schuster as a paperback down the road, but I think this hardcover will be, there won't be as many copies of it as a regular Stephen King book. So my advice is to get one. You don't have to get it the day it's released, but I don't think you should wait too long if you want this book, because you never know, it could actually go out of print.
Yeah, I just went through the ordering process for Canada, and it's $25 to ship to Canada. So I'm going to have to think about that. But
yeah, and I thought it was going to be sold by Amazon and stuff like that. I haven't seen it show up there yet, so maybe they will get it after once it's released or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll have to do some investigation to see if it's coming out anywhere else, because it's so frustrating when you want to buy something now and then the cost of shipping is it doubles the price of the book or whatever it is. It's just an unfortunate reality of today's world.
Yeah, and I don't know how it is for you in Canada, but if I order this one here, I could pay like $65 for the book and postage. And when it comes here, I will probably have to pay like another $20 custom fee and stuff like that. So I'm probably looking at $80 and $100 for it to get it here. So it's quite expensive.
Yeah.
And I must say one more thing about this book. I think that the cover is butt ugly. Excuse me, but I think
well, that's why it's coming from a school, right?
Yeah, but I could have done it so much better. I mean, the font of the text is pretty uninteresting, and the photo is, I mean, I can understand that they want to use this photo, but it's I just think it's terrible. It's not a nice cover. I could have done so much better. I'm sorry, I just had to say that.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Well, that's the difference between a literary publication versus a mass market publication.
Yeah, but I mean, they gotta have taste up there as well, right?
Well, if you listen to King in his earlier days, he said they didn't. So, so there you go.
Well, let's move on. And another book that is out, we don't know when, and we don't really know how or in what form, but King mentioned at the 2016 National Book Festival that Holly Gibney from the Bill Hodges trilogy will be back in an upcoming book. He said that there's one in the process, one book, now that deals with one of the characters from Mr. Mercedes trilogy that's outright scary. So, and he confirmed later that it was Holly he mentioned, so there will be a book about Holly. And we don't know if this really is a book about Holly or if it's a book about something else and Holly shows up or have some small part in it, or we really don't know. But it's going to be scary, at least, and that I like.
Yeah, I'm really jonesed about this. I think Holly is a very interesting character, and we know her struggle for independence in large part was due to her interaction with Bill Hodges. And spoiler, for those who haven't read the trilogy yet, she's on her own at the end of the trilogy. So that puts her in a very vulnerable position. And if something is out to get her, maybe, who knows, maybe Brady Hartsfield somehow managed to survive. But people are going to question her more than a normal individual because of her mental makeup to begin with. So I think this could be a very scary book, both from just a mental perspective, and if there's a supernatural element to as well, that she's going to be everybody's going to consider her the unreliable narrator, and she might be the only sane person in this story, which is kind of cool. So I'm really excited for it. I think this will be a return to the straight horror that I think people are missing since he started the Mr. Mercedes trilogy, even though the last book definitely went back into elements of that. But yeah, I'm really excited about it. Comments on your message board are less than impressed about the fact that he's still delving in the Mr. Mercedes world. But I think that this will be a total return to form of a horror type story. So I'm actually pretty excited about this.
Yeah, and I enjoy the Mr. Mercedes books, so I don't mind at all that he's actually writing about it more. So I have no problem with that, and I can understand that people think that he should do something new, if by not new meaning that this is a sequel, and there's been some sequels, Dr. Sleep and this Mr. Mercedes books and so on. So I can understand that, but I applaud this one. I think this will be good. I like Holly and I like the Mr. Mercedes trilogy. So I have absolutely no problem with this book, not whatsoever.
Okay. So I guess next year could be maybe a 2-book year for King then, because if he has the other one coming out with his son Owen, and this one, so we know of at least 2, which is good considering getting up there.
Yeah.
I just don't know how many years of we can expect to keep expecting books from Mr. King. I have a feeling it's just so wired into his psyche that he will continue writing until he draws his last breath. But we'll have to see.
Yep.
And what's up next? Oh, it's me?
Yep.
Or is it you? Oh, sorry. This is you take this one. I know that you're excited about this.
Yes. This is Stephen King doing a children's book. We know from when the Comic-Con was that they released a book called Charlie the Choo-Choo, and this book is from the Dark Tower, and it was released there for promotion for the Dark Tower the Dark Tower movie. And this one was released in very few copies. It's the exactly word for word the same story that King has written in Dark Tower 3, because when this was released, I think it was Entertainment Weekly, or if it was some other site, published all the pages from it on their site. And at almost the exact same day, actually, I was listening to the audiobook version of The Dark Tower 3 and came to this part. So I actually had those pages in front of me and compared as I listened. They are word for word exactly same book. So this is actually a third book by Stephen King this year. So when it was released at Comic-Con, it was released as a book Beryl Evans, and they brought in actress who played her there signing the books. Instant collector's editions that people paid, I don't remember how much, but I think it was a couple of $1,000s for them online on eBay after they were released. And I think I am against those kind of prices, because I think that if you go to Comic-Con, get this book and have it on eBay like 10 minutes after you have gotten it, it's obviously that you are just doing it to earn some money. And of course that's up to anyone who want to do that, but I think I don't know, I don't like it, because I think it's taking advantage of. I won't go into that, that's up to each and every one of you. But now it has been revealed, and I remember we speculated about this and said it was crazy if this wasn't happening, but now it is. And Simon & Schuster has a children's book department. I remember what it's named. But they have a children's books department, and they are releasing this Charlie the Choo-Choo book. So you will be able to buy it. And I don't think it was very expensive. So it costed like $14 or something like that. So it's definitely different from the one that they released at Comic-Con. So for those who just bought it and are trying to sell it for an overpriced, your days are counted. But for those of you who actually were there and got a copy that want to have it as a collector's item, you can still have that, because there are differences between this new one and the one released at Comic-Con. And I haven't seen the new one for real yet, but on the cover it says, King has a quote on the new one that says that if I were ever to write a children's book, it would be just like so that's quite a fun touch, and that one is not on the original cover, so there will definitely be differences between these two books. The original one doesn't have an ISB number, and for those of you who want to just read the story and check out some beautiful artwork, you will also be able to do that for a reasonable price. And this book is released on November 22nd. Will you be buying this?
Well, I'm looking at it. In the States, it's only like, it's $10 or $11. In Canada, it's almost double the price. It's like $18. So I don't know. It's more of a curio thing.
It's a Stephen King book.
It's
a Stephen King book.
Yeah, but I have the text in his book already, right? Like it's in the Dark Tower book. So do I want this illustrated version of it? I don't know. If I had to choose between this and the University of Maine book, I would go for the University of Maine book over this. So this would be a nice thing to have, but how often am I going to read it? And you're really buying it more for the art than the story anyhow. So yeah. I don't think, I doubt if I'll get it. I mean, it would be cool to have, but I just can't justify the price of it.
What I'm hoping is that, because I think it's fun that this book was done originally as a promotion stunt, but now if you look at it, this can actually be sold as a kid's book. You can actually buy this and read it to. I mean,
I don't think it's a kid's book, but
yeah, but it is. I mean, it's.
Well, if you look at the pictures, it's not really a kid's book. It's like saying Pennywise is a clown.
He is.
He is, but he's a bad clown. And this is a bad children's book in terms of the theme and the message. So it sounds innocent, but when you delve into it a little bit, I think this book would give kids nightmares if they looked at the pictures.
Yeah, well, I think it's a good kid's book. I think it gives a little bit edge to it, and I think if my kids were in the right age, I would definitely read it to them. They are too big now, so they probably would just laugh at me if I suggested that we cuddle up in bed and read a good night story. So I don't think they want to do that. Now they're too big, but I think that it's about a train getting disposed and getting back. Well, maybe some of our listeners have kids in the right age that could try it out. I don't know how it goes.
Yeah, and stay up all night with them after they have nightmares. Okay, one more story here, and there's not a lot to report here. It's just that Stephen King made a passing remark at the National Book Festival back in September because people have been asking about the third Talisman book, and he said, with any luck, we'll start the third one in February next year. We know just what it's supposed to be. So that's the most definitive and solid piece of news we've had about the Talisman book in quite a while, and I'm glad that they're finally focusing their attention on this. It's been over 17 years. They've kind of broken the cycle a little bit. Maybe they'll get this out in 19 years between books, so that would be good. But I'm glad to hear that they are finally getting back to this, because it would be a bummer not to have the concluding chapter in the Talisman trilogy. So I'm really looking forward to it.
And the thing that is make this maybe a little tiny bit more reliable than every other time that they mention it is that now they are actually saying February. Usually they just say, oh, we hope to start it soon and as soon as we both can and stuff like that. Here they are actually, or King is actually mentioning a specific month, which indicates that they probably have at least talked about it and said, oh, maybe February will be. So I tend to lean to that this could actually be something that could happen now, that more than in the past when they mentioned it, just it's going to happen soon and stuff like that.
Right. And the other inference that we can draw from this piece of news is that his Holly Gibney book will be done by that time. So it's pretty well guaranteed to be out next year then, probably I would guess next November.
Yeah, I think that one and the one with Owen would be one in the summer and one in the
the Owen book would be in June probably, and the Holly Gibney book would be November. So we'll just have to keep our fingers crossed. And then the Talisman book will come out a year from next June.
Yep.
2018.
Yep.
That's good. So that is our last bit of news. And we've almost gone an hour in recording already, and we haven't even started Firestarter yet. So
no.
If you need to take a break, you might want to do that. And when you come back, we'll start with Firestarter.
This is great. What's our job? We'd like drive around, pick up stiffs or what?
It's time for reviews from the night shift.
Okay, everyone, we're back, and we're talking about a book that's, I think, become a forgotten child or overlooked child in the Stephen King brood of books, and that is, of course, Firestarter. This is a book that, even over the course of the podcast, the 64 podcasts that me and Hans have done, it's not one that we talk about a lot, and as I was reading the book, I was thinking to myself, why does this book not make like the top 10 list of Stephen King favorite novels when you see people conducting, responding to polls of that type? And as I read the book, I realized that this is probably the most straightforward thriller type of novel that Stephen King had written to this point, in that there's no underlining theme to this story, not like with The Stand, the ultimate story of good versus evil, or Salem's Lot, which is the story about the death of the small town in America. So Firestarter is really just a straight chase and escape novel. The book is composed of two halves. The first half is the story of Andy McGee and his daughter Charlie who, through a government experiment, has inherited some amazing psychic talents that Andy and his wife Vicky only have to a smaller degree because they were part of a test of some special drug that when they got together and got married and had Charlie, she got like the full dose of this power. And that's really it. They're on the run, Andy and Charlie, trying to get away from the government, who is represented by a organization called The Shop. And it's really well constructed. It's very tense. There's just wonderful timing of the Shop agents just missing Andy and Charlie, and Andy and Charlie using their wits to escape from him. And then once they're caught, the second half of the book becomes a prison escape story where Charlie and Andy are working together, even though they're separate from one another, to effect their escape. And that also is really well constructed. It's probably more intricate than the first half of the book because Charlie and Andy are isolated from one another, and there has to be this precision of timing of events that lead to them being able to escape. So it's a really enjoyable read, and King again does what he does best. The character moments. Well, I want to get into that a little bit more when we talk about the movie, but the relationship between Charlie and Andy really feels real, and also the relationship between Charlie and Rainbird, who's the agent from the Shop that is trying to trick her into using her powers, is also really well done. So it's interesting, though, that because I think of that lack of theme, this is not a book or story that a lot of people talk about as much as the other ones. And I don't know what your recollections of this book are, Hans.
Well, I haven't read it again now for this podcast. I didn't have the time to do that, unfortunately. And I got thinking that how long it was since I read it. And I think actually it was about 25 years since I read it. So it's a very long time, and you don't remember the details. And I think that might be one of the reasons that this book is one of the least talked about, because it has some of the same symptoms that The Shining has, that you have so vivid images from the movie version of it, and as soon as someone says Firestarter, you see Drew Barrymore as Charlie McGee, and the movie, as we're going to come into later, isn't one of the best one, and I think that could give a lot of people the interpretation that they think the book might not be as good either, because they remember their main memories are from the movies. So that might be one of the reasons why it's not so talked about.
Yeah, I definitely think there's certainly an element to that, and I don't know if it's just because it seems more slightly juvenile in a way because of the whole way how the Shop operates, and it really seems even worse in the movie, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But it's probably the weakest part of the story for sure, but what's really strong in this book are the small beats between Andy and Charlie, and between Charlie and Rainbird, and those beats don't survive to the movie, and I think those moments in this book is what elevates it above your typical thriller. And even in something like this, that's as straight as forward as a story as Firestarter is, there's still that three-dimensionality to the characters that King is able to bring to Andrew McGee and to Charlie, to a lesser extent to their mother, Vicky. But King obviously made the decision to focus on the father and the daughter, because it would have been a little too unwieldy for three characters to be on the run. And plus it adds that element of threat that these guys are playing for keeps, and that they will kill them if it comes to that. So there's a little bit of that hippy dippy kind of vibe to the government conspiracy thing in that. And that's definitely the weakest part of the story. But I was just really amazed at how well he constructs the chase sequence. There's a sequence there that has Charlie and Andy sleeping in a hotel or motel, and they get up to leave the next morning, and just over the hill is some of the agents are zeroing in on their location, and just as before they get over the top of the hill, they get a flat tire, which allows Charlie and her father to hitch a ride from the motel. And just as they're getting into the car that's giving them a ride, one of the agents who's decided to walk ahead while the other agent changes the tire just comes over the crest just as they're pulling away. So he misses them. And there's all these kind of instances that happen throughout the book. And I think at this point we'll morph into the movie as well, since we can start delving in a little bit deeper into some of the specifics of the story. And this will give you a chance to talk as well, Han. So I'll say right off the top, for me, the biggest hindrance or hobbling factor that the movie has to deal with is the soundtrack by Tangerine Dream. I mean, I like electronic music as much as the next person, but it just doesn't fit the tone and theme of this movie at all.
No, I agree. I agree with the music. It's, I guess it felt better in 1984, maybe even good. What struck me when I watched this movie now is that it hasn't aged very well. It feels like time has run away from it, and it's also very long. It's almost 2 hours, which in 1984, if you remember, or if you were even with us then, is pretty long for a movie, because most movies, at least at around that time when you made your copies of your DVD movies, or sorry, your VHS videotapes, you could often fit 2 movies into 1 3-hour tape. So most movies were about 1.5 hours, and this one is almost 2 hours. So it's a very long movie, and I think they drag certain things out a little bit too much. The acting isn't all that good. So I think it's a very mediocre movie, and I was actually a little bit disappointed when I saw it. I thought it would be a little bit better at least. I was expecting it to be outdated, and because it has a lot to do with technology, that they are giving these drugs and they are doing experiments and everything like that, and so I thought, okay, that would probably look pretty tame or lame even today. But I think most of it is looking too old, and it's kind of painful to watch, I think.
Maybe because I was so jazzed by the book, I had a little bit of rose-colored glasses when I was watching the movie. I think there's a lot of things I like about the movie, but I do agree with you that aspects of it seem very dated. And as I mentioned, the soundtrack by Tangerine Dream, it's just way too mellow and laid back. It doesn't add any tension. It doesn't reinforce any of the tension that's in the scenes, especially when they're on the run and whatnot. And I have to say that the biggest problem, because to me, the core of this cast is actually pretty good. Like, I think Drew Barrymore is a good choice to play Charlie. What did you think of her performance?
Well, for most of the time, I liked her, but I think in certain scenes you could tell that she was fairly new to acting.
Yeah.
And she didn't really deliver those lines and feelings when she was supposed to show emotions. So I think she missed a little bit there, but I think overall she was a good cast, and I think she worked good as Charlie.
Yeah, I think so too. I know that I'm pretty sure I know a couple of the moments that you're referring to. I put that some of the blame to the director on that. I just don't think he set the scenes up properly and gave her the proper instructions as to how to play it. But I thought she was, in general, she played this, because there were times when you really felt for her, and I thought she worked quite well overall. And during most of the special effects sequences, she looked pretty good. That couldn't have been easy to keep her concentration on some of those scenes. And the simple effect that they had of her hair being blown up as she was using her powers, I thought that was effective. So, I thought she was pretty good overall. I also thought that David Keith, or am I getting that wrong? Or Keith David, thought he did a good job with Andrew McGee. I had to kind of laugh at his suit. He sort of, it kind of reminded me of Kolchak from The Night Stalker or something like that. All he needed was that hat, right? Yeah. So that was kind of a weird thing. Martin Sheen, this was his second performance in a Stephen King movie. The other one, of course, was The Dead Zone. Man, he was rocking the hair in this one. That was some really well combed back hair. He had a big pompadour almost going there. So he was okay, but he wasn't as menacing in the book as he was in the movie. I think they lost he didn't have the edge that I thought was necessary. And George C. Scott as Rainbird. Today's world, I think if he would have been cast in that part, there'd probably been a bigger outcry about it. I can't really say that he did a bad job. I just think that they dropped too many elements from the book that kind of hindered his character, and his makeup job didn't really, it wasn't gruesome enough. Like, I expected that side of his face and his eye to be more horrifying to look at, but it was just really like a white contact lens. So they didn't really sex up the look of his disfigurement enough for me.
No, and I think that main part of the acting that I'm disappointed in is those smaller part, like
yes, exactly.
Yeah, the agents that were, I mean, they saw how their colleagues burned like flames besides them, and still they didn't run, and they just acted bad and strange, and I think that was my biggest problem, that they didn't take her seriously when she lit the person next to them on fire. I mean, if it would be me, I would have run away and say, I give a shit in this, and I want to survive. But they didn't, so, and that was very strange. One thing that I want to give them as a big plus, and that is that they were very focused on that what she could do was start fire. And they didn't, when we come to the sequel, they didn't branch that out to let her do other things that would look cool and stuff like that. So when she's in the ending, when the stable is on fire and she want to release the horses, she has to use the fire to melt the iron lock on the door to the horses, so that fell off. Yeah. And they could very, very easily have given her the ability to just open them and make them move, and they didn't. So I think that is a good thing, that they kept it to her specific power, and they didn't go outside of that, and that I like. Yeah,
well, they did have a couple instances where she like had telepathy, right? Because she knew the shop guys, when they came to the farm, were going to kill her father. But that's a non-visual effect, really, because she's just telling us that we're not seeing anything about it. But yeah, I agree with you. I'm glad that they just sort of focused mostly on her pyrokinetic power. But I just want to circle back to your comment about, and what I was trying to establish with the main actors was like the drop between the main 3 or 4 characters to the supporting cast was like the Grand Canyon. And they really, because the movie starts out with a lot of these flunkies chasing Andrew and Charlie, you didn't buy into the tension. Like it was even worse than like watching an old Mannix episode on TV or something like that. Like these guys were all like much lower talented actors, and the whole thing with the suits and they just didn't look threatening at all. Like it was just, and you just didn't buy into them. And again, the music didn't help that this was a really tense situation, that they were chasing these 2 people that had powers. You didn't believe any of these actors were really agents and capable of killing. So there was no sense of tension in that. And that even extended into some of the sequences in the shop when they were testing Charlie's power. Those technicians in that were watching her do her stuff. You didn't believe any of those characters. It was like you had the main actors, and then all the other characters were background characters, and they weren't allowed to talk hardly. So, and they weren't even allowed to act. So they were just like cardboard cutouts, and it just really sucked the life out of a lot of these scenes where there should be a lot of tension. So that was very disappointing to me. And I think that's actually the biggest problem, because those actors, those agents, are at the beginning of the movie, and that's where you want to set the tone for the movie, and they just totally sucked out all the tension in those scenes, which is unfortunate. And the movie also really, the thing when you're reading Firestarter, like there are the sexy scenes with Charlie using her powers and that, setting things on fire. But it's the little beats between Charlie and her dad and Charlie and her Rainbird, when they're talking about good and bad, and whether using her powers are good or bad. And sometimes there's good bad and bad bad. So, and she's conflicted about, and she's getting mixed messages from her father, because he doesn't want her to use the powers, but they're like in life and death situations where he has no choice but to force her to use the powers. So those little moments are really good. And the thing with Rainbird that they really lost was he was on this mission to try to discover what happened to people when they died. So he wanted to look into their eyes to see if they saw or had any sort of revelation just before they passed away. I mean, they show him kill the Wainless. He basically just karate chops the guy in the nose. I mean, yeah, visually that's kind of like, okay, that's kind of cool. But there was none of that subtext about him trying to face death or anything like that. So when he wanted to kill Charlie, there was no reason. Like his reason didn't make sense. Like, why would he be so interested in killing her? What was special about her over anybody else that he would want to kill her? And that's totally lost in the movie, which, as we've seen with that adaptations of King's movies, those are the most important things. And unfortunately, when you lose that, it just turns into more of a generic type of thriller. So overall, I thought the practical effects of the fire for that time period were pretty well done. The only thing that really doesn't work for me is the fire that would chase people when they were running, because it was just like a line along the grass. Even when the three agents split and the fire split into three, like that just doesn't work. Like it should have just been like a line from her to those guys through the air or something like that. Like, there's no reason for it to follow the ground other than the fact that they had, they just couldn't afford or didn't have the technology to show much more elaborate special effects. But some of the stuff they did, like with the fireballs that she was creating in that, I thought that was still looked fairly cool, even though it was very rigid looking, because, the things had to travel in a straight line and whatnot. Whereas if she's using her mind, she could make them do zigzags and whirl loop-the-loops and whatever she wanted. But overall, I thought the fire effects were pretty coolly handled. I can't really complain, especially when you take into account the technology of the time.
Yeah, I think that was. I think the special effects were probably pretty good back in 1984. So I don't think. Of course, when we watch it today, it's going to look lame.
Yeah.
But I think it happens. Things they do today will probably look lame, say 30 years from now. So that's not much we can do about it. But we just have to accept that it is what it is.
Yeah, I even like the little throbbing music they used when Andy McGee would use his push power. Like he put his head up to his hands, and you get that. I thought that was pretty well done too.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering too, because this book is written in between probably the first and maybe the second Dark Tower book, because I'm wondering in a different world if Rainbird would have been a gunslinger. And the reason I say that, I want to read a short little section here. And this is the moment when Andy and Charlie are captured at their grandfather's cabin on Tashmere Pond, and Rainbird's sitting in the tree waiting for them to come out. So I'm just going to read a couple of paragraphs here. It was not a long shot, and he would not have wasted a moment's worry if it had been a bullet he was planning to put through the girl's neck. But he was dealing with something far more clumsy, something that jumped the risk elements by a factor of 10. Fixed inside the barrel of this specially modified rifle was a dart tipped with an ampule of orezin, and at this distance there was always a chance it might tumble or veer. Luckily the day was almost without wind. It is the will of the Great Spirit and of my ancestors, Rainbird prayed silently, guide my hands and make my eye that the shot may be true. The girl came out with her father by her side. Jules was in it then. Through the telescopic sight, the girl looked as big as a barn door. The parka was a bright blue blaze against the weathered boards of the cabin. Rainbird had a moment to note the suitcases in McGee's hands, to realize they were just in time after all. The girl's hood was down, the tab of her zipper pulled up only to her breastbone, so that the coat spread open slightly at the throat. The day was warm, and that was in his favor too. He tightened down on the trigger, sighted the crosshairs on the base of her throat. If it is the will. He squeezed the trigger. There was no explosion, only a hollow plut and a small curl of smoke from the rifle's breech. So he has that little mantra that he says, if it is the will of the Great Spirit and of my ancestors, guide my hands and my eye that the shot may be true. It almost kind of reminds me of the gunslinger's mantra a little bit. So
yeah, he might be I was thinking that he might be one of the big coffin hunters.
Yeah, that's the other thought I had too. That
a failed gunslinger.
Yeah. So that was interesting. But when I read that, it just really popped out at me, and because I don't remember that from my previous read, which like you was probably 20 plus years ago. So I was just thinking, in another world, Rainbird could have been a gunslinger of some type, whether he was a coffin hunter or maybe an actual gunslinger, who knows. But so I thought there was a cool little undertone of that. And this book does bear some similarities to Carrie in that it's a girl again that has these powers. Of course, this girl is much younger, and if you visit the Stephen King Revisited site, Bev Vincent references the historical context of this, and there's some really cool facts in here. One of them is that King based Charlie on his daughter Naomi, used her as the model, how she looked, how she walked, and that. So he had her as his model. He was a little worried that there was too much similarity to Carrie in that with this power thing, but then the differences between their ages and that worked in his favor. Though it is mentioned in the book and in the movie that because of this Lot 6 drug that they tested the people with, that Charlie's pituitary gland has been altered by this. that who knows what's going to happen once she hits puberty, when she as a teenager, that how amplified her power is going to be, because that's when the pituitary gland is at its most active during adolescence, when all the hormones and whatnot are pumping out. So I think this is probably one of the reasons why King will never revisit Charlie, because he really blows open the scale with the potential of her power to the point where I think it's Wainless says that she could crack the earth like an egg. And that's a hard thing for a writer to write. If she's that powerful, like, there's nothing that can really destroy her. He sort of ran into that problem a little bit with Dr. Sleep too, when the niece of Danny Torrance was so powerful that King kept her out of the climax of the story, because she was too powerful. And I think that was the same issue that he has with Charlie McGee. She's just too strong. She's just too powerful. And where do you go with something like that? He would have to come up with some sort of lame excuse to cripple her powers. And by in the time between the book ends and if we revisited her now, she could have become like a dictator of the world or something like that too, right? Because who's going to stop her? So I think that's why we'll never see a sequel to Firestarter, which is too bad in a way. But that's my thoughts on that. What do you think?
Yeah, it would actually be interesting to go back and visit her again, and having the book ending with her cracking the earth open and exploding. That would be a really interesting ending to see how people reacted to that one.
Yeah.
But I don't think we'll see a sequel to Firestarter. I know King has mentioned, as you said, that he would want to get her back with Danny, and they would move to Salem Slot and raise kids. But I don't think that he's serious when he said that. So I don't think we will be back with her.
Yeah.
Maybe we could have some book in which she's mentioned that, this girl who did that maybe, and that would give some leads to what happened to her.
Yeah.
But I don't think we will have a full book.
Yeah.
To that.
Yeah, maybe there could be like a Easter egg in one of the Dark Tower movies where they come across a world where everything's burnt to the crisp or something like that.
Yeah. Charlie McGee was here.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, so that would be kind of cool. So, yeah, because this book doesn't really have a specific theme, which is, to my mind, is the thing that differentiates a regular thriller from something that becomes a classic, like Firestarter or The Stand, not Firestarter, but Salem's Lot or The Shining or The Stand. I think that's the missing element in this story. And I mean, it's still a really well written book though. And like you said, the movie, I think, had clouded my perception of how good of a book it was. So I was really glad. I mean, I literally got to the last third of the book and I couldn't put it down. I had to finish it, even though I knew it was going to happen, but it was just so well done. And yeah, I'm really happy this podcast gave me a chance to reread the book. And it also has one of my favorite book covers. It's the one with the flames that give you the outline of Charlie's nose and mouth between her eyes. So, and the rest of the cover is white. It's one of my favorite. It's a very minimalistic cover, but it's one of my favorite covers as well. So I really like it. And it's just, King takes one of our fears, fire, and plays around with it again. He did it with the Trash Can Man and The Stand, and now he's done it here again with Firestarter. So it's a more, I don't want to call it ordinary or by that, but it's a little bit more by the numbers kind of thriller, but it still has that extra King flavor of that I think makes it stand above other books of similar ilk. So, is there anything else you wanted to say about the book?
No, I think that covers it. Even though we don't have a sequel to the book, we do have a sequel to the movie. Yeah, that's called Firestarter 2 Rekindled. Well, this is a sequel, and it was done for TV, and I think that if this one would have been a success, there would probably have been a Firestarter TV show. I think this would have been the pilot. But everything that we thought was quite alright with the first movie is totally wrong in this one. So this is really a really bad movie. The best thing, I think, when they do a sequel is that when they take the first movie and they make it a continuation. And they really wanted to do that with this one because they have flashbacks from what happened in the first movie. But I saw these two practically back to back, or at least days after each other. So I had the first movie very fresh in my memory when I saw this one. And the thing that they have done is they look back to these scenes where the mother is killed, where they are captured, and when they're doing the experiment. And not only they are doing these scenes, redoing them, so they don't use clips from the first movie. So the first thing is that they're doing it with different actors, and I can accept that because they probably couldn't buy the rights to use the original one. But they have done them differently than they were in the first movie. They are army men storming a cabin where they are hiding, capturing them, and they are just doing alternate version of what happened in the first movie. And I mean, if you have the first movie fresh in your memory, that is just ridiculous. And you're thinking that, what, do they don't think I remember the first movie, or but this one was released in 2002, so it was almost 20 years after the first movie. So I guess they figured that everyone who had seen the first movie had forgotten it, so they could get away with it. But what we see in this movie is an older Charlie. She has been going under a different name, and she is still having problems with handling fire. And we see her, she's out at a bar and getting picked up by a car, and is ready to basically have sex with him on the hood of a car, which seems very strange to me for the Charlie McGee character, but I guess she's aroused. But she has to break it off, because when she gets excited, she starts to generate heat that sets fires. So she leaves the guy running there from and saying, "Oh, I can't do this," and running away, and basically sets her whole block on fire by doing so. So it's very strange. The character is not the same character, I think. She's very strange now that she's been a little bit older. And she's going into this, well, for her school she's writing a paper, and she's writing about these experiments that her parents were involved in. And this is, of course, a way for her to try and find some kind of cure for what's happening to her. And she runs into a reporter, Vincent, who is... sorry, he's not a reporter. He works for a company that is giving money for the people who were in this experiment as a settlement. He thinks that, at least. So he helps this company to track these people down, and once he has, another man from that company comes and kills them. So they just want to get them out of the way. And he ends up with Charlie McGee at the home of the wife of the doctor who did the experiment. Quite a complicated trick here. And they are starting to talk, and eventually he finds out who he is, and he convinces her to come back to his company where they can cure her, he says. And this company is, of course, run by John Rainbird, played by Malcolm McDowell. And here we have another character switch, and Rainbird, who in the first movie is more like a hired gun or hired man who do jobs for Charlie Sheen's character. Here now he's like the big man, the director for this company. So that's also very different. And in this company, or whatever it is, he has a lot of other kids that have the similar thing that Charlie has, but they have different powers. Someone can make you talk, and someone can make you feel things, and stuff like that. So they have different abilities. So he's trying to get like an army of these kids to give him power and help him do stuff. And he wants Charlie McGee to join them. So there's the plot of it, and it's just not working. And as she's captured and run away and stuff like that, as we can expect. And here they do what I was admiring the first movie for not doing. They give her different powers. She can open and close bars for windows and stuff like that. So they're in a corridor, and she locks all the windows so no one can get out. And they are giving her a little bit extra power just to spice it up. So, and well, I'm so glad it didn't got a continuation, because it's really, really, really bad. I don't really think there's anything good with it.
me and Hans sort of traded off. I read the book. He watched this. I think I got the better deal.
We certainly did.
Again, there's some interesting casting in here. Like you've got Dennis Hopper and Malcolm McDowell.
Yeah.
I'm curious because I don't remember the restaging of scenes from the original movie. How did they compare to you? Like, were the effects better, or was it not? No.
No. I think that they were sloppy done, and probably they just wanted to give you a hint of what had happened, and they did it in the easiest way they could. So they showed very little, and still totally wrong, because they showed, like I said, they were captured in a cabin, and like, you know, in the first movie, the father comes home and find the mother in the closet, and they pull her nails out and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Here they are apparently living in a cabin in the woods, and when the military comes with big rifles, the mother runs into the woods and is shot in the back by one of the military guys.
Right.
So they changed the story, and it didn't really show any effects, but it just changed what happened. And
right.
But it felt really silly when you had just seen what actually happened already in the movie. So I think they wanted to give you an idea of what happened. They didn't want to spend too much time and money and effort in doing it, so they did it in the easiest way they could, and I think they basically counted on that no one would remember or care either way.
Yeah. And the thing that I remember the most annoying for me was the repurposing of the Rainbird character by Malcolm McDowell to make him the head of this shop for these children. I don't know why they just didn't use the Captain Hallister character from the book instead, which it's just, I guess they just like the name Rainbird, but it just seemed like a cheap device. And it's funny, because here we've had this character twice. It's supposed to be an Indian, and both times they've had a different white actor playing him. I forgot to mention this when we were talking about the movie, and that I had always imagined or pictured in the movie version that, I don't know if you've ever seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. There's the Indian, the chief. That real big guy. I always pictured him as Rainbird.
Yeah, I think it would have worked much better.
Like I realized he was really big, but I think that's actually would work. Especially like if he had like that bad eye and all that stuff. I think he would have been a really scary president, because George C. Scott's a good actor. Don't get me wrong, but he wasn't scary in that movie at all. And I think Will Simpson, just by the virtue of how big he is, I think that would have been a very imposing presence in the movie. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting also how they changed the characters and their persona, because in the ending, and I'm spoiling this movie now, but doesn't care because no one is going to watch it anyway. But he puts all the kids in one town, and he's going to show the town what he can do. He makes one kid can go by you and say, "Oh, you're blind," and he's blind, and you can say, "Oh, you can't walk," and he just fall over. And they are going around and doing their small tricks to get people mad and scared and whatever. And Charlie says, "I won't be part of this," and she's leaving. Eventually she goes back and is more or less forced to use her powers. And as she was reluctant, she would just have maybe put a trash can on fire. But no. She just whams the entire town and rams it with fires everywhere. So, and that's also like, what? She didn't want to do it, and now she's just ruining the whole town. And it's so inconsistent in how the characters act and how it's like when we talked about the Dark Tower earlier, that even though they change it and everything, the characters has to have their own, they have to be themselves, and here they just lose it. I don't think they even saw the first movie.
Probably not. Yeah, or maybe never even read the book. Who knows?
Yeah, probably not.
Please don't tell me Stephen King wrote this. Did he?
No.
Philip Eisner. Okay, good. Thank God. Yeah. I mean, King.
No, I don't think he was involved in this.
No, King's had some problems even with adapting his own material, as we just saw with Cell recently. So, but I like to think that was a budget problem more than anything. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have much to add to this. I vaguely remember the miniseries. I especially remember the kids and Dennis Hopper. Oddly enough, the actor who played Charlie doesn't really make an impression on me. So I don't think she was very dynamic in the movie. But it is kind of funny that with so many of these movies, they all end up coming to Canada.
Yeah.
Because she gets on the bus to come to Canada.
Yeah, that's how it ends.
Yeah, just like World War Z, right? Brad Pitt comes to Canada.
Would have been interesting to see how if to a TV show what she would have done to Canada.
Yeah,
One
giving
thing
us
that-
warmer winters, maybe.
Yeah, no. I think if you just look at the covers for the first movie and the follow-up, you could actually buy that she is an older McGee. So I think that just based on how she looked, I think she was cast quite good, and you could believe that she was actually the same girl, just about 15 or 20 years older. So I think but I think that was probably a lucky coincidence. I don't think that was something they planned on doing, but yeah, I felt I had to say something good about the movie. That was the best thing I could come up with.
Yeah, it's funny how so many of these productions of Stephen King work fall flat, and it's, you really have to grab onto and treasure the ones that turn out good. And it seems like there's only a few special people out there like Frank Darabont, Rob Reiner, that seem to get this material and are able to balance the needs of entertaining the viewing audience as well as maintaining those little moments that make the stories so powerful. So that's a rare gift.
Yeah, and I think unfortunately in this case King is a big name and everybody knows him. So I think that many people think that, I'm going to do a King movie, and I don't even have to do it good because people will see it anyway because it's a Stephen King movie. And I think that is today it's changed because today there has been so many bad movies. So today maybe it's more like, not the King movie because he's not good. But in the 80s, when they did all these movies and he was pushing books, I mean, there was a new King book each month almost. So I think he was a huge name then. I think people want to see those movies. It didn't matter if they were good or bad. So I think a lot of studios and filmmakers just, I'm going to do a Stephen King movie, and bam, I have to get it out fast because it's now he is the big name. And so I don't think they had to struggle. Today I think it's different because I think today when you talk Stephen King movies with people, they are often mentioning the bad ones more than the good ones. So I think today it might be the opposite, that I'm going to do a Stephen King movie. Now I have to prove that there is it is possible to do a good Stephen King movie. So I think that has switched, and I think that is for the good a good thing. But I think if we look back on the 80s and early 90s, I think most of the movies were crap, with some exceptions.
Yeah, and to be fair, a lot of the issues I think come too with the technology that was available to the filmmakers at the time. I mean, Marvel movies didn't really take off until the technology was there. Lord of the Rings was not possible until the technology was there. And I think because Stephen King was a bankable name, some of the stories that they tried to adapt back then they probably shouldn't have, because they really couldn't do the stories justice. And I think that barrier, that's the final barrier that's been removed. Now the problem is movies that use special effects like that are usually so expensive that it's kind of ridiculous. Like, I mean, we're looking at the Dark Tower movie only costing $60 million, and you think about that, $60 million, that's a lot of money. But, we're so used now to these Marvel movies costing $250 million, which is just ridiculous. So, and it'll be interesting to see if the first movie is successful, how much of a budget increase they're going to give to the next one. I'm almost afraid for them to go over more than, say, depending on which book they're doing. Like, I really think 100 million, 150 million would be more than enough. I think if you give them more than that, then you know that they're going to turn the books into more action sequences than the actual character stuff, which is what you saw with some of the Lord of the Rings movies, the later ones and that, as opposed to telling a really good story. So we'll have to see. But I think in a way too, Firestarter is of a certain time period when the government conspiracy stuff was a lot more rampant, and more maybe naive as well. I don't think that the story is easy to do today. And I think part of it, again, is the lack of theme. Like, this is just a straight up thriller. And, once you've done a version of it, I don't think there's really anything new you can do with it unless you add something to it that's not in the book. But then it wouldn't really be what the book was about in the first place. So
yeah, and I think it would. One thing that would be interesting is if I'm interested in the shop, and I think King could do stories about the shop, and I think he should do like short stories about the shop and being like almost going to the shop archive and pulling up files, but he could go back and see, he could look at Firestarter case and other case like that. But I think the shop as a thing is something that could be explored more, and I think that could work even now, even though it's definitely a Cold War thing maybe, but I think it could work today. Maybe as a retrospect and look back to stuff that happened in the 80s, then you could still make it as a Cold War thing in that era, but have it happen now.
Yeah, it could be like a modern version of the X-Files or even Fringe, I guess, the two shows that I think of that sound very similar to what you're describing. So
yeah, and I think it would actually work if King wrote it as a collection of short stories or stuff like that.
So I think we've pretty well burned the candle at both ends when it comes to Firestarter.
Yes, I think we have.
I mean, it's a really good, well-told story. It's a thriller, but it just doesn't have that underlying hidden story that elevates King's other works. That's really the only missing ingredient here. Otherwise, it's a very well-written book. And if you haven't read it, or you've sort of been colored by the movies, I highly recommend that you go back and revisit this book, because I think you might be surprised at how good it is.
Yeah. And if you haven't seen the sequel, you don't have to. You can skip that one.
There you go. All right, folks, that's our show for this time. I believe our next episode will be the long-awaited documentary episode. We're going to...
Hopefully we are trying to put that together, and hopefully we'll be able to do that until next time.
Yes, and that will be Pet Cemetery. So look forward to that. But as usual,
stay safe,
but
stay scared.
The end. Bool.
Bye.